Woof. It was one of those scheduled losses that we've become accustomed to. Not a great night for the Dubs. However, if you want a positive spin on the outlook moving forward, we got some wise words and some good news from a doctor that's coming up on today's show.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
What are they going to say now?
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's good, everyone? Welcome to the Locked On Warriors. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, covering Golden State Monday through Friday. You can catch us live after the games, ways you can check us out, YouTube, wherever you get your audio podcast. Thank you for making us part of your day, a part of your week, part of your busy lives, and always talking Golden State Warriors basketball with us. On today's show, we'll break down the one-on-one little road trip in Minnesota, what went well, what went wrong, specifically break down game 2 of the back-to-back and why the Warriors never really had a chance. The bricklayers in this game, woof, big picture, and then we have a doctor, that Dr. Stone. We called him in for the diagnosis on Jimmy Butler and how he's going to heal, we believe, in his upper 30s and dealing with a torn ACL. Kylen Mills is on the program today to break down this ball game, and Kylen, I think the stat sheet really kind of does it justice for the Warriors. I mean, pretty much everyone was like 4 of 13, 4 of 12, 5 of 13. The team shot at 35% as a whole, 23% from deep. There was no Steph Curry. There was no Jonathan Kuminga. There was no Jimmy Butler. There was no Draymond Green. There was no D'Anthony Melton. There was no Al Horford. And most importantly, there was nobody that could create their own shot. It was ugly.
Yeah, my favorite part of this game, Chuck, was a couple hours beforehand and we were talking about it. And I said, who's playing tonight for the Warriors? And you go, everyone except Steph Curry and D'Anthony Melton and Draymond Green and Al Horford and Jonathan Kuminga's out with an injury. So that pretty much told the story. And this was also a Minnesota Timberwolves team that you had a feeling was going to come out with a vengeance. Obviously, a ton of emotions in the city of Minneapolis and surrounding kind of that area. Had to be a lot to grapple with for the Minnesota Timberwolves last night. They lost so many in a row that they suffered the loss last night. They know the Warriors are shorthanded. I just kind of expected this to be a team that was going to come out pretty intentional and high energy early on. I will say the Warriors were able to create more early in this game. And it looked like, hey, maybe this young group and this kind of skeleton crew for the Dubs can stay in this. But in the end, the Timberwolves were just too much. I do think it's unfortunate the Warriors have to sit so many guys on the back end of back-to-backs. And that's something that Steve Kerr and the training staff and the front office have been very clear about from the start of the season, that they are going to be conservative when it comes to some of the older guys like Steph, Draymond, Al, and then D'Anthony Melton, of course, a guy who's dealt with injuries throughout his career. But it's frustrating because without Anthony Edwards, this felt like a winnable game. You got the win last night. Would have been big to get to, but I mean, it's hard to fault the skeleton crew that they had for not being able to pull it off, because just on paper, this is a young group that was outmatched. I'll commend them for fighting. That's one thing I will say. There were a couple of solid individual performances. I say solid because no one really stood out in a big way. And these are big opportunities for these guys. So I think, hey, it's a positive to maybe give some different guys some different looks, but it was a brutal watch. I'm not going to lie. Fourth quarter, I was like, I'm tuning out a little bit, but hey, you get the main core back, you move forward. And it is what it is. But this was a Timberwolves team that was clearly the better team tonight, as you would expect going into this matchup based on who is available on paper.
Yeah. And this is one of the most, frightening things about tonight's game is the comment from SEP96. He says, does Joe know this is the post-Steph roster? And obviously that's going to change at some point. But yes, I mean, this is who you have without Steph Curry, without Jimmy Butler, without Draymond Green when that timeline runs out in 2 years, assuming Jonathan Kuminga is not on this team. This is it. And it doesn't look good. This is now the third or fourth time we've seen this crew run around together. We saw it against Sacramento. We saw it against the Thunder. We saw it against name the team and name the loss. So this is not 2-3 years ago, let's go like 5 years ago at this point, 4 years ago, when the Warriors won the championship, and you would get nights where Steph and Clay wouldn't play, but you had Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins and name who was coming off the bench at that point, Porter and Bielitsa and whoever, and they could lead you to some wins here and there. It's pretty much like scheduled loss on some of these load management nights.
The bench mob for the Warriors does not have anyone who can create offense. I think to your
they're
point,
good complementary pieces, right? They're good complementary pieces, but like Moses Moody, when you watch him out there, like he needs to be fed like the game before, using Steph and using Draymond and using DeAnthony Melton to break down the defense to get to his spot in the corner and play around the world. Not a night like tonight where they're guarding him 28 feet from the bucket. They say, Moses, break down your defender. That's just not what he does.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Moses Moody is the guy who you need to be 3-and-D to play solid defense, hit those open threes when the guys around him, pull some gravity. And like you said, when you move it around the horn and get the defense to shift and he finds himself open, but he's not a guy who's going to create a ton. That being said, I actually would like to see Moses Moody be more aggressive in terms of trying to attack on the bounce and get to the rim. And sometimes he does have success in that, but he's a guy who's got to be smart in picking his moments, because like he's not going to be the athlete who blows everyone out of the gym. And actually the same can be said for Brandon Pajemski, not the most athletic of players. I don't think that's any secret, but he can be crafty in finding ways to get to the basket. And he can sometimes break teams down on the bounce, at least to where you get enough penetration into the paint where you kind of force the defense to shift or collapse a little bit. And he does that sometimes, but still, he's not a reliable guy who's going to be creating his own shot off the dribble or really being able to potently, get an offense going based upon his ability to attack on the bounce. So it was a tough watch, because I do think there were a lot actually of offensive possessions where it just felt like there was nobody who could create. They're all just kind of passing it around. And I remember I said to you at one point, I'm just like, someone has to attack. Someone has to break down the defense to some degree to start that shift and to get them moving. And there were definitely multiple possessions where it felt like there wasn't anybody who could do that. And part of the reason is the Warriors also don't have any kind of interior threat without Jimmy Butler. I mean, that's a huge loss when the Warriors have all their guys available, let alone on a night like tonight when you have so many different players who are resting. And that's going to be a challenge for the Dubs moving ahead. They're going to have to rely on their defense to create transition opportunities to really help take the load off the half-court offense, because I do think the Warriors are going to struggle, because Jimmy Butler is a guy in the half court you can feed the ball into, and depending on the matchup he's able to draw, sometimes he can, back down a defender. He can get it into the mid-range. He can attack on the bounce. And you're completely lacking that. I do think that Quentin Post was exposed a little bit in this game. And that was something I said to you as we were watching it, because it's just clear that Post can knock down the outside shot, and he had a good night hitting 3 threes, but he's not an interior threat at all. There's no inside game. And I think he still lacks the physicality to really mix it up with bigs down low at this level in the NBA. And then I think the same thing on the defensive side. I just don't think he's physical enough on the glass when it comes to defending and protecting the rim. And that was exposed when you look at some of the players that scored for Minnesota. I mean, Rudy Gobert having 15-17 double-double, 15 points, 17 boards. And he was into double figures in the first half, actually. I think some of that was eased up in the second half, and he was rested. I just thought that he had his way. Naz Reid had his way. And to me, that is a bit of an indictment on what the Warriors have available to them in the post. And Quentin Post getting the start tonight, to me, it's clear that he cannot hang defensively with some of those bigs down low he's going to be facing in the NBA. And then Trace Jackson Davis came in and played some minutes. He did get burned a couple times defensively, 8 points, 4 boards in 24 minutes. Okay outing. But I do think that was exposed a little bit, that the Warriors are lacking inside. And obviously Draymond, while undersized, is able to guard some different post players and at least make their lives a little bit more difficult. But who do the Warriors have outside of that? And to me, Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid having the games that they had with 15-7 and 15-17 really speaks to the Warriors lacking in the front court. And that's why they're going to have to be disruptive defensively to create in transition, have any shot of continuing to win games and be a team that's into the playoffs.
Yeah, if you have a sort of load management night where Steph and Draymond take off, you need DeAnthony Melton to at least help break down defenses and get some guys open shots. And I will say there were some decent looks from guys like Moody and Pods and Post and Spencer and Santos and just a lot of bricks, uncontested bricks. But you saw it from first possession on. How many times did the Warriors go 22 seconds into the shot clock and just have nothing? I mean, Spencer was blocked by like Gobert at the top of the key on a 30-foot heave. Moody was kind of, playing cat and mouse with his defender.
Funny,
and
he
couldn't
got
get by
blocked
him.
there at the end, and they were kind of laughing about it on the broadcast.
There were a ton, in Minnesota with Randall and McDaniels and Gobert and DiVincenzo and Naz Reid coming off the bench to score 15. And even Bones Highland, they just had a lot better players than the Warriors tonight. I mean, the Warriors are running Leones off the bench and just no one really that could.
I was like, who's that guy?
That was our scouting in the fourth quarter. Pretty much was watching Malavi Leon.
He played like 2 games. I was like, who's that guy that just ran out there?
6 and 5 for him. Warriors leading scorer was Quentin Post with 13. Pajemski had 12. Moody 10. Spencer 10. Santos 11. So they shared the wealth. All 5 starters in double figures, but there wasn't a single player on the Warriors that you're like, when it became a 10-point, 12-point game, you're thinking, who are they going to get the ball into their hands for a little heat check? And when it wasn't Pods, you're like, this team just does not have it. And it's one of those nights. Warriors dropped 26 and 22. Minnesota improves to 28 and 19. Straight ahead, big picture for the Dubs. Also, we got a doctor in the house, not in the house, but virtually talking about Jimmy Butler and why we should be optimistic about his ability to return at full strength next season. That's coming up.
And most importantly, he a dog.
We need more dogs.
Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Yes, sign me up. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. Time savings and real peace of mind knowing an expert is going to handle it for you. For a limited time, you could have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, make sure you file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today.
Forget that. We champs. Why are you starting with that question? We got 4 championships.
How are we feeling, Kylen? Because this is the first time I've had the chance to talk to you since the Jimmy Butler injury. This is the first time you've been on this show in weeks, and probably the last time you were on, we were in a bad mood about the Warriors for a different reason. It's because they were, teeter-tottering with 500 to a game above to a game below, and then they get hot while you're gone. And then the injuries pile up. So how are we feeling about the outlook? Forget the next couple of years, but just right now.
Okay, well, I do want to bookend our conversation about this particular game with some positives and start with that in terms of how I'm feeling overall. There were a few positives from this game. Number one is that I still really like Will Richard. This is a guy who just comes in and has a ton of energy and it really high upside defensively. In this game, he had 6 steals, which I think is a new career high. Again, still inexperience in terms of the NBA, still have a lot of room for growth. But look, if you're a guy who can play defense, you have a chance in Steve Kerr's system. And I think that the Warriors could use a good disruptive defender. And for him, 6 steals in this game, I think was a positive. He's averaging at least 1 steal per game while playing, limited minutes in terms of his bench role. And then he's shooting the ball relatively well on the season. I think it was about 48.5% from the floor, 36.5% from 3. And I just think he's a high motor guy, a high energy guy. He plays with intensity. He makes the hustle plays. He mixes it up in terms of just running down loose balls, chasing it down on the glass. Again, just kind of getting steals, getting out in passing lanes, harassing opposing players. And so I actually really like him. I think he has a ton of potential. And Will Richard, while he didn't stack up a ton of points in this game, when we checked 4 points, and had a tough night from 3, 0 for 6, which is uncharacteristic. I mentioned shooting 36.5% on the season coming into this game. I still love the defensive activity and the motor of this young player. So there's maybe something that you could build upon. Quentin Post knocking down a couple threes. I mentioned it. I think he was exposed a little bit inside, but still his ability to stretch the floor. And I think working in when I don't think he's ready to be a go-to center in the NBA, but still working in the rotation, coming in off the bench. If he can hit threes that way and stretch the floor with certain lineups, I think that's a positive. I feel like I had one more positive, but I'm honestly running out of ideas. I do think that looking back to last game and this game combined, Moses Moody hitting some shots and really heating up from the outside is a big positive. In this game, he cooled off a little bit compared to where he was in last night's game against the Wolves, but still finishes in double figures, hit a couple of threes. And again, that's without the creation of Steph Curry or some of the other guys who've been playing around him. So he had, there just isn't as much space. There isn't as much time when it comes to offensive spacing without Steph on the floor. And he still was able to, score in double figures. And again, I just think that they need him to hit the open shots. I thought his stat line last night was pretty indicative of what they need from him. And Brandon Podziemski, I thought, had a good game last night as well. Less impressive in this one tonight for me, but I struggle with Brandon Podziemski being your lone playmaker on the floor. I think that was another thing that was exposed to me a bit, as there were times the offense looked stagnant. And the Warriors didn't shoot the three especially well, so that also didn't help. Big picture, though, I think that I just go back to the fact that without Jimmy Butler, this is a totally different team, and a team that's really going to have to lean into the defensive piece. I just don't think they have enough offensively to create in the half court where they're going to be able to score 100 a night if they're not getting significant transition buckets. If they're not able to generate steals, it'd be disruptive defensively. I just don't think they're going to be able to generate enough offense. So I really think they have to lean into that being the bread and butter for this team. So big picture, without Jimmy Butler, what we saw the last two nights, like to me, that was the big difference between last night and tonight was the Warriors generated how many steals? Forced how many turnovers? Had 26 points on turnovers. They had like 20 fast break points. And that was with Steph Curry playing and with D'Anthony Melton playing. And obviously Draymond, not that he does a lot offensively, but still with Draymond. That was with all those key guys playing. Al Horford, who did hit a couple threes and does provide more of an interior presence that they were clearly lacking tonight. And so that just didn't quite happen. But I think that's going to have to be the recipe for success for the Dubs is defense to offense. I mean, do you agree or disagree? Even with Steph on the floor, like it can't be the Steph show. And that's kind of the issue of why the Warriors brought in Jimmy Butler, was to give Steph some help. And now you don't have Jimmy Butler. So
I think you made
to help Steph. The defense has to help Steph.
I think you made a really good point about Jimmy Butler breaking the paint and giving you easy looks down low, whether he's sealing his defender and catching the lob and finishing that way, whether it's slowing things down and getting to the free throw line and being that calming present, whether it's that turnaround elbow jumper, whether it's a back down and finish at the rim because he's so damn strong. He's not a center, obviously. I mean, the Warriors are playing him as pretty much power forward at most points this season, but he was technically your lone big. Horford and Post camp around the three for the most part. They don't do a lot of their damage inside, and he was one guy that could really give you interior buckets and allow you to play a little inside-out basketball, and you really don't have that right now. It's a lot of dribble penetration and, frankly, Melton breaking down defenses, Pods breaking down defenses, and just using Steph Curry as the decoy to get everyone open. But question is, who out there can you even get at this point that would be able to do that for you? Like the name that's brought up is Trey Murphy over and over until that becomes a viable option because the Pelicans are willing to include him in a trade deal. I mean, he's not a viable option until that day comes. And aside from that, it's like we're talking things into existence that don't really seem to have much legs. Now, Jonathan Kuminga, this would have been a perfect night to have Jonathan Kuminga out there and say, go give us, 25 shots and literally try to carry this team offensively. Unfortunately,
he could have had free reign in this game for sure and kind of do what he wanted and create. And he's someone who can at least create in some ways.
Better. I mean, the Warriors.
He can tackle the basket. He uses athleticism, if nothing else.
This was the definition of a scheduled loss. Like, there's just, even without Curry.
That begs the question that, like, should the Warriors be doing a better job managing their personnel?
I mean, the issue is like, if you threw Draymond out there, would it help? No, not in tonight's game. If you threw D'Anthony Melton out there, would it help? Yes, but you wanted him last game. You wanted to take that first game with Edwards out there, and then especially with a 2-game losing streak coming in and having yet to beat them, I think it took a little bit of pressure off him winning that first game. But Al Horford, like, you wanted him in that first. If you had him out there today, would it have made a big difference? No. I mean, this was just a part of the schedule, a back-to-back, a canceled game in the middle of all this that the Warriors just never flat out had a shot in. As soon as they announced the injury report, never had a shot in. And that's why all we can really say is Wolf in all caps.
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely are concerns to be looked into regarding what this roster is going to look like when Steph Curry retires, because I do think that for some of these young guys, this is your opportunity. And like, I was really disappointed with Trace Jackson Davis. Like, he got a longer run in this game. I just was not impressed. To me, at this point, you got to ask the question, is that a wasted roster spot with TJD still hanging around at the end of this rotation? And I don't know. I wasn't blown away. I know people have liked Pat Spencer. He had a great hot streak earlier in the season. I was kind of I do like Guy Santos. I still think energy is a thing, and he finished with a double-double. So, kudos to him for running down some boards. But I mean, there've got to be concerns about, I know there's been this whole thing of, hey, we're riding the 2 timelines, building for the future. But like, what did you see on the floor tonight that you could build a future around?
There's no second timeline.
There's still some level of hope around Jonathan Kuminga, but
Yeeks. Yeah, not good. Not good. I mean, you would hope there's just you could have played this game like 7 times, and I don't think there's a world where anyone on the Warriors without Curry on the floor, without Draymond or Jimmy or any of their stars are going for like 30 points in a game. Pods was the guy that you thought maybe, and he was only able to get off 13 shots, team high, I guess, tied with Santos, but you would have thought he could have gotten off some better looks than he did tonight. But again, scheduled loss, not a ton you can do about it. Kylen, appreciate you for joining the show today. We're going to have Doc on the other side. It's Dr. Stone in San Francisco. He breaks down Jimmy Butler's injury and why it's a big deal, obviously, but the future of Jimmy Butler it's not all bleak. Age is just a number in this scenario. We'll tell you why coming up on Locked On Warriors.
Forget that. We champs. Why are you starting with that question? We got 4 championships.
All right, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game. You'll have the tickets locked in within minutes. I mean, you'll get all the prices up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout. You can get the panoramic view from your seat. You got zone deals where you choose the section. Game Time's going to pick the seats and you save. Great last-minute options. Everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com.
And buddy, stop trying to dribble the ball.
On today's show, we have a very special guest from the Stone Orthopedic Clinic in San Francisco. It's Kevin Stone, and he's here to talk about Jimmy Butler's injury, what it means longer term into his upper 30s, and how he could potentially recover as a Golden State Warrior. First of all, how you doing today?
Doing great. So, gorgeous weather in San Francisco. We're the luckiest place in the whole world today, huh?
I mean, that's not saying much, but absolutely. It is beautiful, no doubt about it. The outlook, not necessarily beautiful on the future of Jimmy Butler as a Warrior, at least shorter term. The question I have is when a, upper 30s player tears an ACL like this later in a season, and usually it takes about a year to recover pretty fully at this point with the advanced science and everything. When you're in your upper 30s, as compared to, let's say, your what is the recovery process like comparatively?
So I would tell you at first, forget about the age. Professional athletes are different than you and I. They're spending their life day in and day out with great training, great physical therapy, great massage therapy, great diet, incredibly driven. A 30-year-old or even 40-year-old ACL injury can come back to full sports at full level as long as they're completely dedicated to it. And there are a lot of advances that have made that happen now with better surgery, better tissues, better augmentation with growth factors and cells and lubrication. So a lot of the things that used to hold an athlete back in the past really don't apply so much anymore. And if he wants to come back at full level, he can.
Why do you think there's such a panic when it comes to an aging player as compared to like a 24-year-old that may tear his ACL? It always seems like from the public, there's just a notion of kind of like, well, that's probably it.
I think it's a lot more about money, and the teams are concerned about investing in an older player as their skills were declining, maybe. It's more about history of in the past, we always thought of older players, older being in their 30s or 40s, as not coming back, and yet they are. We look at Lindsey Vonn in skiing, we look at other athletes all around. There's really a number of people breaking the barriers in that preconceived notion. So it really depends on him. It depends on his drive and what he wants to do. And if he wants it, it's there for him.
We know he wants it. We know he's driven. We've seen his workout regimens and what he does in the offseason to put in the work, assuming that he does. What do you think the timetable is to where he could return in a Warriors jersey and give kind of the same ease-in method that DeAnthony Melton had this?
So we always used to say it took a year to come back from an ACL. That's really not true anymore. Number one, the surgery has gotten more accurate, more precise. It's added an extra layer of protection, what's called an extra-articular reconstruction, which we now do to almost every ACL. It's added a layer of augmentation. We're adding PRP shots and cells and growth factors during the healing process, a few months into it and at multiple intervals during the healing process as well. And we've added, obviously, much smarter rehab and coordination and protection. And you're seeing athletes coming back at nearly full levels at 6 months now. And I would suspect that, someone like him at this stage where next season's on the line, if he really goes after it, would try to come back early and in all likelihood would get away with it. Now, there's always going to be the player who doesn't get away with it and has a repeat injury, but those are actually relatively rare. Most of the guys who really try to come back early succeed.
When did this advancement change, I guess, to where you are in your upper 30s and nowadays you can not really miss a beat? You miss the time, but once you get back athletic-wise, you're all right.
So, I'm an orthopedic surgeon at the Stone Clinic. I'm also chairman of the Stone Research Foundation. It's a public nonprofit research foundation. And we've been doing a lot of work on these growth factors and on tissue selection over the last 15 to 20 years. And what we've seen is in the lab as well as in the clinic, augmentation of tissue healing, accelerating of tissue healing. And we've also learned how to use donor tissues, allograft tissues, rather than taking apart one part of an athlete's knee to rebuild another. We now almost always use a donor tissue, which we augment with cells and growth factors. So that shift has been going on over the last 10 years, and we've been collecting enough data in our clinic and in others about when you can do that, when you can get away with it, and how hard you can push it. And I think you're going to see more and more athletes coming back sooner because of that. So I'm hoping to give you a little bit of optimism and his fans and him as well, because I really do believe that we learn the most from our pro athletes and all of our athletes because our athletes cheat, meaning we tell them to be protective for this period of months. They come back into the office carrying their crutches, which they haven't used very much. And, hey, doc, I just felt good and I pushed it. And we learned from them about what we really could do versus what we thought could happen. And so I would say in his case, he's going to push it as hard as possible.
What is the difference between, I guess, someone that wants it, as you say, and returns a little bit quicker and returns fully healthy as compared to someone that still wants it, but like, what's the difference in drive levels between, someone that returns whatever as compared to someone that really took the recovery process seriously?
So it's attitude, drive, resources, motivation. It starts with attitude. The patient who comes into surgery, comes into the doctor's office with a smile on their face, says, "Hey doc," and the doc says to them, "Look, bad luck you injured your knee or shoulder or ankle, but listen, let's use this as an excuse to help you come back fitter, faster, and stronger than you've been in years. Let's focus on your nutrition program, focus on your rehab. Sure, we're going to protect your knee, but we can train your upper body program, your upper body much harder than we've ever done before, or work on your proprioception." Use the downtime as a window to get better than you've ever been before. And so the patient who has that smile and has that confidence and, puts behind them the fact the injury happened and looks forward to taking advantage of the time and coming back better, always does so much better than somebody else who doesn't. And then just pulling together your resources. Sure, if you're a pro athlete, you've got everything on the table and easy for you. But even if you're the normal weekend warrior, taking advantage of the local gym, the local athletic trainer, the great physical therapist, the resources that you have around permit you to treat yourself like a pro athlete. Really objectively look at your diet, use your fitness apps and say, okay, what are they telling me? And just find a great coach, because I think we've all learned from every sport we've all played. If you find a great coach, find a great trainer, find a great mentor, you'll come back, you'll do whatever it is you're trying to do so much better than you could ever do on your own.
All right, Doc. Thanks for not only the knowledge, but also the optimism that you've given Warriors fans after this 8-minute segment. We appreciate it.
You bet. Happy to help.
All right, good stuff. Jimmy Butler, don't be worried about age. It's just a number. If he wants it, he puts in the work, we'll come back, maybe not stronger than ever, but just as good as before. And the hope is that, with it being January, you could have him back ready to go by, say, December, by Christmas of next season, or potentially even before. And that would be big time. Unless Mike Dunleavy's actually balking and the plan is to include him in some sort of a trade deal. We'll see. That's all we can do at this point. Unfortunately, I guess, rather than unfortunately, hopefully, I think that's the right word, we will not see this iteration of the Warriors again ever. Remember the movie Bird Box, where if you open your eyes, you die? It's what it felt like watching this game. It was brutal. I don't think anyone enjoyed it. Even the most diehard of diehard fans. Even Leon's parents, I don't think, enjoyed watching this game. And he had 6 points, 5 rebounds. It was brutal. Warriors shoot 35%. 9 of 39 from 3. They turn it over 18 times, and they get blasted by the Wolves 108-83. Ironically, like almost the same score as the night before the other way, where the Warriors held the Wolves to 80 and blasted them by a good 25 points. So Utah Jazz are up next. We'll discuss it on Wednesday, but for now, have a great rest of your night. Again, Warriors lose by 25 points. The Utah Jazz are on the way. This is Locked On Warriors. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll see you.